The hospital room was wrapped in the constant hum of machines, a steady mechanical breathing that filled the silence between each faint beep. The sharp scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mingled with the distant trace of coffee from somewhere down the hall. Outside, Albuquerque lay under the dry chill of the desert night, its lights scattered like a broken necklace at the foot of the Sandia Mountains. Emily Reyes stirred awake, her body heavy, still aching from the storm of contractions that had left her spent. The birth was over hours ago, but her baby, Mateo, had been born early and taken to the special care unit for newborns. The bassinet beside her bed was empty, and that emptiness throbbed louder than any physical pain. Then she noticed the light. It wasn't the harsh, sterile glare of fluorescent bulbs, but a soft golden radiance that seemed to flow from a point in the far corner of the room. Slowly, it moved closer, and Emily saw a figure standing beside the bassinet. It was a woman. She wore a pale blue mantle that fell to her feet, with a matching veil as delicate as the sky before dawn. In her arms, she cradled Mateo, resting against her chest, breathing calmly, without any tubes or wires in sight. Emily blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Her pulse quickened. How had this woman entered the room? Hospital security was strict, and her baby was supposed to be in the special care unit under constant monitoring. "Who are you?" Emily managed to whisper, her voice rough. The woman turned toward her, and Emily felt something she couldn't name. Not fear, but a strange, settling peace that crept into her, even as her mind protested. The woman's gaze had a depth that seemed to pass through every defense Emily had ever built. "Do not be afraid," the woman said, her voice both gentle and certain. "I am with him." The words hung in the air. Emily tried to sit up, but the soreness in her muscles forced her back. "Please, he needs oxygen, he needs treatment." Emily tried to reason, even though part of her didn't want to shout for help. The woman smiled, a smile both sorrowful and full of light. "What he needs most is a mother who believes, and he already has one. If this moment already has you leaning in, subscribe now so you won't miss how this miracle unfolds." Before Emily could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway. A nurse and a young doctor rushed in, their eyes scanning the room. There was no woman. The bassinet was empty again, only the faint warmth of the sheets, as if someone had just been holding her baby. "Emily? You paged?" the nurse asked gently. "Mateo's still in the special care unit. Do you want to go see him?" Emily's throat tightened. She looked at the bassinet one last time, still half expecting to see the woman's blue veil there. "Yes," she said quietly. "Please." The nurse wheeled her through the dim corridors, the city's silvered moonlight spilling through occasional windows. When they entered the newborn unit, Mateo lay beneath the warm light of his incubator, tiny chest rising and falling, the monitors steady. Her fear didn't disappear, but it shifted, no longer an avalanche threatening to bury her, but a stone she could hold in her hand. She pressed her palm against the clear wall of the incubator. "I don't pray much," she whispered, not sure who she was speaking to. "But if you sent Mary, then please don't leave us now." Somewhere behind her, so faint she could almost believe she imagined it, came the scent of roses. Morning arrived in a slow, pale wash through the hospital windows, spilling across the floor tiles in thin ribbons. Emily sat in a chair beside Mateo's incubator. Her hand slipped through the small opening so she could feel the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. The hum of the machines and the steady rhythm of the monitors had already etched themselves into her mind, each sound a reminder of how fragile life could be. "Dr. Sao." Aaron Patel walked in, his white coat crisp, his expression measured but kind. He carried Mateo's chart and spoke in a calm, even tone, the kind that didn't hide the truth, but didn't rush it either. "Emily," he said, lowering himself into the chair beside hers. "Mateo is stable this morning, but we need to keep a close watch on him. His lungs are still immature, and he's showing signs of respiratory distress. We're also seeing some elevation in his white blood cell count, which may indicate an infection starting." Emily's heart clenched. She stared at the tiny shape inside the incubator, his skin so thin she could almost see the veins beneath. The memory of last night, The woman in blue, the soft light, the scent of roses, pressed against her mind. She had felt peace then, but now fear came rushing back. "What does that mean?" she asked quietly. "It means we'll be treating him with antibiotics as a precaution," Dr. Patel explained. "He's in the right place, but progress will be slow. With premature babies, there are good days and harder days. You'll need to be prepared for both." Emily nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to be strong, but the weight of it all, the machines, the bills, the uncertainty, was like trying to breathe underwater. "Doctor." Patel hesitated before asking, "Do you have family nearby or anyone who can help?" She shook her head. "My grandmother's in Las Cruces, but she's too old to travel right now. My mother, we haven't spoken in years." "What about work?" "I'm a waitress at a diner," she said, her voice dull. "No paid leave. If I'm not there, I don't get paid, and rent's due next week." He didn't give her platitudes. "The hospital has a social worker, Dana Brooks. She's good at helping parents navigate resources. So I'll ask her to come by." Not long after, Dana appeared, carrying a worn leather satchel. She had warm eyes and a way of speaking that made even hard truths feel manageable. She laid out forms for state medical assistance, food benefits, utility aid, and a short-term housing program. "It's a lot, I know," Dana said, seeing the overwhelmed look on Emily's face. "But this isn't about charity. It's about giving you the tools to keep your baby with you and healthy. We'll work through it together." "Are they going to call child services on me?" Emily asked suddenly, her voice cracking. Dana shook her head firmly. "No, the goal is to support you, not take your child away. But the sooner you apply for assistance, the better." Emily signed where Dana pointed, her hand trembling. Every form felt like both a lifeline and a confession of how close to the edge she really was. Later that afternoon, Nurse Lila came in to adjust Mateo's oxygen settings. "He's doing a little better today," she said softly. "Numbers are steady." Emily hesitated before speaking. "Lila, if I told you I saw someone last night, a woman in blue holding Mateo, would you believe me?" Lila glanced at her, then kept working. "I've been a nurse in newborn care for 15 years. I've seen medicine do miracles, and I've seen miracles medicine can't explain. You don't have to choose between them." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver medal, its edges worn smooth. "My grandmother gave me this. It's called the Miraculous Medal. You don't have to wear it, but it might remind you you're not alone." Emily closed her fingers around it. The metal was cool, solid, real, and for a moment, so was her hope. That night, as she sat in the dim light beside Mateo's incubator, the medal warm in her palm, she thought she heard a whisper inside her own heart. "I am with him." She leaned closer to the glass. "Then please," she murmured, "stay." By the third morning, Emily was beginning to recognize the rhythms of the newborn unit. Nurses' shoes whispered along the polished floors, monitors kept their steady chorus of beeps, and the air carried a faint mix of disinfectant and warmed formula. Yet nothing felt routine to her, not with Mateo's tiny form inside that glass cocoon, not with the memory of the woman in blue still bright in her mind. She hadn't told Dr. Patel yet. She wasn't sure if she would, but the words the woman had spoken wouldn't let her go. "Do not be afraid. I am with him." It was Nurse Lila who broke the quiet that morning, checking Mateo's lines and noting his oxygen levels. "You look like you've been turning something over in your mind," she said without looking up. Emily hesitated. "I remember more about her." Lila didn't have to ask who her meant. "She called herself Mary," Emily said, her voice low as though saying the name too loudly might make the memory vanish. "And she said something about a sword that once pierced a mother's heart." Lila's hands stilled for a moment on the incubator latch, her eyes thoughtful. "That's from the story of the Virgin Mary," she said softly. "It means she knew what it was to suffer because of her child, to watch him in danger and not be able to take the pain away." Emily's throat tightened. It felt like she knew exactly how I felt, like she'd been there. Before Lila could respond, Dr. Patel stepped in for his morning rounds. "Good news," he said, reviewing the chart. His oxygen needs are a little lower today, but the blood work still shows signs of infection, so we'll continue antibiotics. Emily listened carefully, nodding. She'd learned to absorb every detail, because even small changes could mean so much. Still, a shadow of worry clung to her. Dr. Patel glanced at her. "You're doing well, Emily. These first days are the hardest, but Matteo is showing strength." She swallowed. "Do you believe in things science can't explain?" The corner of his mouth curved, though not in mockery. "I believe in evidence, but I've seen cases where the timing of recovery surprised me. You might call that something else." After he left, Emily sat alone for a while, turning the small silver medal Lila had given her between her fingers. Its worn edges spoke of years of faith in other hands, faith that had endured. She wondered if it could take root in her. A quiet knock sounded at the door, and a man in a simple black shirt with a white collar stepped inside. "Emily Reyes?" he asked. "I'm Father Tom, the hospital chaplain. Dana thought you might like someone to talk to." Emily didn't know why, but she nodded. Father Tom pulled up a chair. He didn't dive into prayer right away. Instead, he asked about Matteo's birth, about Emily's family, about her life before the hospital. He listened without interrupting, his presence steady. Finally, Emily told him about the woman in blue, about the light, about the name Mary. Father Tom's eyes warmed. The Church teaches that Mary is the mother of all believers, and that sometimes she appears to bring comfort or warning. The sword she spoke of, that's a reminder she understands the pain of mothers, perhaps more than anyone. "I don't pray," Emily admitted, almost ashamed. "Not since I was a kid." "That's all right," he said. "Prayer isn't about perfect words. It's about opening a door, even just a crack, and letting God meet you there." She didn't promise him anything, but when he left she found herself whispering the words she half remembered from childhood. "Hail Mary, full of grace." The rest faltered, but something about saying it eased the tightness in her chest. Matteo stirred in his sleep, a faint flutter of breath against the ventilator's rhythm. Emily leaned closer, her fingers resting on the glass. "If you really are here," she whispered into the quiet, "don't stop now." From somewhere she couldn't see, the scent of roses returned, faint but unmistakable. Emily woke to the sound of wheels squeaking down the hall, a cart delivering breakfast trays she wouldn't eat. Her eyes were grainy from a night of half-sleep in the stiff hospital recliner. Matteo's monitors still gave their soft, rhythmic beeps, and she exhaled in relief at the steady pattern. By mid-morning, Dana Brooks arrived, a folder tucked under one arm, a paper coffee cup in her hand. "I brought fuel," she said, placing it on the side table. "You've got a mountain of paperwork ahead, but we're going to climb it together." They went through rent assistance forms, applications for food programs, and Medicaid updates. Each page felt like a shield Emily was trying to build from paper, thin, flimsy, but all she had against the world pressing in. Halfway through, Dana's tone shifted. "Your landlord's office called me. They're asking about next month's payment." Emily's stomach dropped. "I'm already behind. If I don't work, I can't pay, and I can't leave here." Dana tapped the folder. "This voucher will help, but it takes processing time. We need to keep the landlord from starting eviction proceedings." "I'll make that call myself." Emily nodded, grateful but ashamed. "Thank you." As Dana left, Lila came in with a fresh set of vitals for Matteo. "He's holding steady," she said. "You should do some skin-to-skin later. It helps with bonding and can even improve breathing." Emily nodded, though her thoughts were already tangled by the next problem, Rafa. She hadn't told anyone he'd called. The call had come last night, just as she was settling into the recliner. His voice had been softer than she remembered, cautious. "I heard about the baby. I want to see him." She'd frozen. "Rafa, now's not a good time." "I'm clean," he said quickly. 8 months. I'm in a program. Just let me see my son." The words had pulled at something deep in her, but she couldn't forget the years of broken promises. Now, as she sat beside Matteo, she wondered if she could keep him away forever. By late afternoon, the day's quiet was broken by a sudden alarm from the incubator. Emily's heart lurched as Lila rushed back, adjusting the oxygen flow. "He dipped a little, but he's coming back," she reassured. "Sometimes they just need a nudge." Emily pressed her hands together, the miraculous medal warm in her palm. She didn't realize she was praying until she whispered aloud, "Please keep him safe." The air shifted, not a flash, not even a glow, just a sudden fragrance of roses, as if someone had walked past with an armful of fresh blooms. Lila glanced up, her eyes flicking toward Emily for a heartbeat before returning to her work. When Mateo's vitals settled, Lila straightened. "He's fine now," she said, "but that was a reminder. These babies can change fast. Don't lose focus." Emily nodded, her pulse still racing. She knew Lila hadn't imagined the scent. That evening, Dana returned with a small victory. The landlord had agreed to hold off for 2 weeks. "Not much time," she warned, "but enough to get the voucher processed." When Emily was finally alone, she thought about the woman in blue again, Mary, the sword that had pierced her heart. And she wondered, maybe miracles weren't always loud and dramatic. Maybe sometimes they were as quiet as a baby's breath evening out after a scare, or as simple as 2 more weeks to find a way forward. She leaned toward Mateo, whispering, "We're still here, baby. We're still fighting." And somewhere in the stillness, it felt like someone else whispered back. The hospital had begun to feel like its own small world. Sterile hallways, the steady beeping of machines, nurses moving like clockwork. But on the 5th day, Emily realized she needed to step outside, if only to breathe air that hadn't passed through a filter. Dana had offered to sit with Mateo for an hour, and Lila promised to call if anything changed. Emily hesitated, then finally let herself walk out into the cool New Mexico morning. The sun was sharp and white, the kind that made the desert sky look endless. She walked without a destination at first, just following the streets until the sound of traffic faded. That's when she saw it, the old adobe walls of Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. The front doors were propped open, and from inside came the faint flicker of candlelight. Emily paused at the threshold. Churches had been part of her childhood, mostly because her grandmother insisted, but she hadn't stepped inside one in years. The last time she'd prayed, really prayed, she had been 15 and begging God to keep her parents together. That prayer hadn't been answered. She told herself she was only going in for the quiet. Inside, the cool air carried the faint scent of wax and wood polish. Rows of wooden pews stretched toward a simple altar, and on the wall above hung a painted image of the Virgin Mary, wrapped in blue, her hands open as though ready to gather someone in. An elderly woman in a shawl was arranging fresh flowers in a vase by the altar. She glanced at Emily and smiled, her eyes kind. "Light a candle," she said, her voice thick with a Spanish accent. "It helps when you don't have the words." Emily found herself moving toward the rack of small candles. She dropped $1 into the metal box, took a thin white candle and touched its wick to the flame of another. She set it in place and watched the wax begin to melt. She didn't know how to pray anymore, so she spoke as though to the air. "If you're real, if you sent her, help me fight for my son." The words left her in a rush, and with them came an ache she hadn't let herself feel. The fear of losing Mateo, the weight of doing it all alone, the constant calculation of bills and hours she couldn't work. When she looked up again, the painted Mary on the wall seemed different. Not glowing, not moving, just present, as though the artist had captured something alive. Emily stared until her eyes burned, then blinked hard and stepped back. The elderly woman approached, wiping her hands on her shawl. "For perseverance," she said, nodding toward the candle Emily had lit. "Sometimes that is the only prayer we need." Emily managed a small smile. "Thank you." On the walk back to the hospital, the air felt different. She didn't know if anything had actually changed, but she carried with her the image of that flame, small but steady, refusing to go out. When she returned to Mateo's room, Lila was there, rocking slightly on her heels as she checked his monitors. "Good timing," she said. "He's had a calm hour. I think he missed you." Emily leaned close to the incubator. "I missed you too, baby." She reached into her pocket and touched the miraculous medal, cool against her skin. Maybe it was superstition. Maybe it was faith beginning to stir. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. But she found herself whispering just under her breath, "We're going to get through this, I promise." And for the first time since Matteo was born, she almost believed it. By the 6th morning, Emily had learned to read the screens almost as well as the nurses. She could tell when Matteo's oxygen level was holding strong, when his heartbeat found a steady rhythm, and when something shifted enough to draw a nurse's quick glance. Dr. Patel stopped by during rounds, the chart tucked under his arm. "We've got some encouraging numbers," he said. "Oxygen support is a little lower today, and he's tolerating feeds better. That's progress." Emily smiled faintly. "So he's getting stronger?" "He is," Patel said, but his voice carried the careful caution of someone who'd seen recoveries turn suddenly. "We're not out of danger. His immune system is still fragile, and any setback could undo what we've gained." Emily nodded. The words "not out of danger" clung to her, even as she tried to focus on the progress. Midday brought a scare. She just stepped out for a quick coffee when a nurse's voice called her name sharply. Emily dropped the cup in the hallway and ran back to find 2 nurses adjusting Matteo's breathing tube. The monitor showed his oxygen dropping. Lila met her eyes. "He's okay. We caught it early. Sometimes the tubing shifts just enough to cause a dip." But Emily could still feel her pulse racing in her wrists as she sat back down, gripping the side of the incubator like it could anchor her. Father Tom appeared not long after, drawn by Lila's quiet call. He didn't ask if she wanted prayer. He simply began, his voice a low murmur over the steady beeping. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." Emily's throat tightened. The rhythm of the words was strangely soothing, almost like the sound of ocean waves, each one returning her to a calmer place. Then she felt it, a shift in the air. It was subtle at first, like the way a room feels just before a summer storm. The scent followed, roses again, soft and fresh, impossible in the antiseptic air. Emily looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. And there she was. The woman in blue stood at the far side of the incubator, her hands resting lightly on its clear surface. She didn't speak, but her gaze met Emily's, and in it, Emily saw something she couldn't explain. Sorrow, yes, but also fierce, unyielding love. Emily's lips trembled. "Is he going to make it?" she whispered. Mary's eyes softened, and though her voice was barely a breath, Emily heard it as clearly as if it had been spoken aloud. "You must forgive to make room for the miracle." Emily frowned, unsure. Forgive who? But before the answer came, a nurse entered to check Matteo's vitals, and the woman in blue was gone. That night, when the ward was quiet and the lights dimmed, Emily sat in the chair with the miraculous medal in her palm. Her mind kept returning to Mary's words. She thought of her mother, of the years of silence between them. She thought of Rafa, with all his failures and empty promises. Forgiveness wasn't something she had to give either of them, she told herself. They didn't deserve it. And yet, Mary's words stayed, refusing to fade. She leaned forward, her voice low. "I don't know if I can do that," she admitted to the stillness. "But I'll try, if it means keeping him." Matteo stirred, his breathing even, the monitors steady. And Emily thought, just for a moment, that the faintest trace of roses lingered still. Emily woke with the taste of hospital coffee still bitter on her tongue, and the echo of Mary's words heavy in her mind. "You must forgive to make room for the miracle." She didn't want to think about it. Forgiveness, in her world, was a dangerous luxury. People mistook it for weakness, an open door for hurt to walk through again. But the thought stayed lodged in her chest like a stone, refusing to move. She spent the morning writing in a small spiral notebook Dana had left for her, a practical suggestion for keeping track of questions for the doctors. Instead, Emily began filling the pages with unsent letters. One was to her mother, whose absence had shaped so much of her life. The other was to Rafa, whose mistakes had cost her trust again and again. In both, she wrote the things she could never say out loud, the anger, the hurt, but also the memories of better moments that still lingered despite everything. By the time she set the pen down, her hands ached, and her throat felt tight, as if she'd spoken each word aloud. Dana stopped by mid-morning with an update. "The housing voucher is moving faster than I expected. If everything goes through, you could have the papers in hand before Mateo is discharged." "That's good," Emily said, though her voice lacked the relief she thought she'd feel. Dana studied her. "Something's on your mind." Emily shook her head. "Just tired." In the afternoon, a small group from the parish visited the newborn unit, bringing hand-knit blankets and prayer cards. Emily accepted a soft, cream-colored blanket for Mateo, thanking them quietly. One of the women, a stranger with kind eyes, slipped a folded piece of paper into her palm. When Emily opened it later, she found a handwritten note: "Forgiveness is the soil where miracles grow." Her breath caught. She looked around the room, half expecting to see Mary standing somewhere in the corner, but there was only the quiet hum of machines and Mateo sleeping in his incubator. That evening, Lila came in to check Mateo's oxygen flow. "He's gaining a little weight," she said with a smile. "It's a good sign." Emily managed a real smile in return. "That's the best news I've heard all day." After Lila left, Emily took the miraculous medal from her pocket and turned it over in her fingers. She remembered her grandmother telling her stories about Mary, how she had appeared to people in their darkest moments, not to shame them, but to lead them towards something better. Emily wasn't sure she believed in visions or in miracles that came with conditions, but she couldn't ignore the way the message had found her twice in the same day. She picked up the notebook again and wrote one more sentence under her unfinished letters: "I don't know how to forgive you, but I'm willing to try." When she looked up, the light in the room seemed a little softer, as though the day had shifted without her noticing. Mateo stirred, opening his tiny fist for just a moment before curling it closed again. Emily reached through the opening in the incubator and let her finger rest in his palm. His fingers closed around hers with surprising strength, and for the first time in days, she felt something loosening inside her. Not gone, not fixed, but loosening, as if the knot of resentment had been pulled one thread closer to coming undone. She whispered, "We're getting there, baby. One step at a time." And though the air carried no scent of roses that night, the quiet felt just as holy. The next afternoon, Emily was finishing a cup of coffee in Mateo's room when the phone at the nurse's station rang. Moments later, Lila stepped inside. "There's someone here asking to see you," she said carefully. "His name's Rafa." Emily's stomach tightened. She hadn't decided what to do if he showed up. 8 months sober wasn't much compared to years of chaos. Still, Mary's words about forgiveness echoed in the back of her mind, and she knew she couldn't hide forever. She agreed to meet him in the hospital's small courtyard, just outside the main lobby. It was enclosed with brick walls and lined with planters, offering a rare pocket of quiet away from the hallways. Father Tom was already there, leaning against the low wall, waiting. "Thought I'd sit in for this," he said lightly, but Emily heard the unspoken promise. He'd step in if things went wrong. Rafa approached hesitantly. He looked thinner than she remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper. His dark hair had been cut short, and his clothes were clean but worn. He kept his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Hey," he said. Emily nodded. "Hi." They stood in awkward silence until Father Tom gestured to a bench. Once seated, Rafa cleared his throat. "I heard about Mateo from a friend. I know I don't have the right to just show up, but I wanted to see him." Emily's first instinct was to say no. Her mind filled with images of him disappearing for days, the smell of alcohol on his breath, the arguments. But another image intruded: Mary's calm eyes, her voice telling Emily she needed to forgive. "You can't see him yet," Emily said slowly. "He's still in the special care unit, but you can sit with me for a little while." Rafa's shoulders eased a little. "That's fair." They talked in halting sentences. He told her about his job washing dishes at a diner on Central Avenue, the halfway house where he stayed, and the meetings he went to every night. "I'm trying," he said, almost defensively. "It's different this time." "I've heard that before," Emily replied, her tone flat. "I know." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I messed up more than I can count, but he's my son. I want to do right by him, even if that just means paying for diapers and staying out of your way. Emily studied his face. There was no swagger now, none of the quick charm he used to lean on. Just a man who had fallen low and was trying, however clumsily, to climb back up. Father Tom spoke gently. Change is slow, but every small step matters. Before they left the courtyard, Rafa pulled a folded bill from his wallet. It's not much, but maybe it helps. He handed her a crumpled 20. I'll do more when I can. Emily hesitated, then took it. Thank you. Back in Mateo's room, she sat beside the incubator, the bill tucked into her pocket, feeling the strange mix of emotions swirling inside her, distrust, cautious hope, and a tiny ember of something like mercy. Mateo stirred in his sleep, his hand twitching as if reaching for something. Emily leaned close. Your dad's trying, she whispered. I don't know if he'll make it, but I guess we'll see. She stayed like that for a while, watching his tiny chest rise and fall. There was no vision of Mary that afternoon, no scent of roses, just the quiet truth that sometimes forgiveness started with the smallest, most fragile yes. And in that small yes, Emily realized there was room for more than fear. There was room for the beginning of change. The hospital seemed to shrink after sunset, the echo of footsteps stretching longer in the corridors, voices falling into murmurs. Emily sat in her chair beside Mateo's incubator, the new blanket from the parish folded neatly across her lap. The day had been uneventful, the kind of day that made her start to hope she might be turning a corner. But just after midnight, the monitor's steady beeping shifted into a frantic rhythm. Emily's heart lurched. What's happening? She called, her voice sharper than she meant. Two nurses appeared almost instantly, one checking the breathing tube, the other calling for Dr. Patel. The numbers on the screen told a story Emily didn't want to read. Mateo's oxygen was dropping fast, his tiny chest moving too quickly, as if he were trying to outrun something inside him. Dr. Patel entered with his usual calm, but his steps quickened as he reached the incubator. Possible infection flare, he said to the nurses. Draw blood cultures and prepare the broad-spectrum antibiotics. Emily stood frozen, every muscle in her body telling her to act, but there was nothing she could do but watch. Emily, Patel said without looking up, I need you to take a step back while we work. Her knees felt weak as she moved toward the wall. The room swirled with purposeful movement, tubing adjustments, syringes, whispered orders. The oxygen level on the monitor kept dropping. She closed her eyes. Please, she whispered, to no one she could see. Please, God. Mary, anyone. Help him. The air shifted. It began as a faint sweetness, almost drowned by the smell of antiseptic, then grew stronger, the unmistakable scent of fresh roses. Emily's eyes flew open. Mary stood beside the incubator, her veil catching a light that seemed to come from nowhere. Her hands rested gently near Mateo's head, and though no one else seemed to notice her, Emily felt the stillness that came with her presence. Do not be afraid, Mary said softly, her voice carrying over the noise of the machines. This battle is not only yours. Emily's tears spilled freely. Don't take him, she pleaded. Please. Mary's gaze held hers, calm, sorrowful, yet certain. She said nothing more, but Emily felt something ease in her chest, as if the air itself had steadied. The numbers on the monitor began to climb, slowly at first, then with more confidence. Dr. Patel's voice sharpened with focus. Vitals improving. Keep monitoring. Let's finish the cultures and start the antibiotic. Within minutes, Mateo's breathing slowed, each rise and fall of his chest matching the rhythm of the monitor's steady beeps. The tension in the room loosened, replaced by a cautious relief. Patel turned to Emily. He's stable again. That was close, but we're past the danger for now. Emily could only nod, her gaze still locked on the space where Mary had stood. The scent of roses lingered, faint but undeniable. When the room was quiet again and the nurses had left, Emily pulled her chair close to the incubator. She reached through the opening and let her fingertips rest against Mateo's tiny hand. You scared me tonight, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I think we weren't alone. The miraculous medal in her pocket felt warm against her palm. She closed her hand around it, and for the first time since Matteo was born, whispered a prayer without hesitation. Thank you for giving him back to me tonight. Please, help me be the mother he needs. Somewhere in that still hospital night, Emily thought she heard the faint rustle of fabric, like the sound of a veil brushing against the air. Morning sunlight spilled across the floor of Matteo's room, pooling in warm squares that felt almost out of place after the night's terror. Emily hadn't slept. She'd kept her chair pulled close to the incubator, watching every breath, every twitch of his tiny fingers. When Dr. Patel arrived for rounds, he studied Matteo's vitals, then glanced at Emily. He's stable this morning, he said, his tone cautious but lighter than usual. The antibiotics should help keep the infection under control. We'll keep monitoring closely for the next 48 hours. Emily nodded. Thank you. For last night. Patel gave a short nod. That's my job. But after a pause, he added, I have to admit the speed of his recovery was unusual. I've seen premature infants bounce back, but rarely that quickly. It doesn't mean we let our guard down, just that it's worth noting. Emily hesitated. What would you call something like that? Patel's eyes met hers. In medicine, we call it a positive response. Other people might call it something else. He didn't elaborate, but she caught the faintest shift in his expression, the look of a man who didn't want to believe in things he couldn't measure, but who also couldn't ignore them entirely. Later that day, Dana stopped by with more papers for Emily to sign. We're almost done with the voucher process, she said. If the landlord still holds the apartment, you'll be able to move back in with some stability. That's good, Emily replied, though her mind kept drifting back to Mary's appearance the night before. The image was burned into her memory, the calm in her voice, the way her presence had steadied the room. By afternoon, a new challenge arrived in the form of curiosity from outside. A local news station had caught wind of a miracle baby rumor. A reporter had shown up at the hospital's front desk, asking about a premature infant who had suddenly recovered overnight. Dana entered Matteo's room, her voice low but firm. We're not giving interviews. I've asked security to turn them away. People can be well-meaning, but attention like this can spiral fast. Protecting Matteo's privacy is the priority. Emily felt a rush of relief and a flicker of fear. How did they even hear about it? Could be a visitor, could be a staff rumor. These things travel, Dana said. The important thing is that your focus stays here. When the evening shift began, Dr. Patel returned for a quick check. His eyes softened as he adjusted Matteo's oxygen tube. You know, he said quietly, when I was a resident, my wife and I lost our first baby. It was a cord accident, nothing anyone could have stopped. I kept thinking, if there was a God, why didn't he intervene? Emily looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. It took me a long time to keep doing this work without letting that question poison me, he continued. So I still don't use the word miracle, but last night, I don't have an easy explanation for what happened, and maybe that's worth respecting, even if I don't understand it. Emily's throat tightened. I think, maybe you just built a bridge, she said softly, between the way you see the world and the way I'm starting to. Patel didn't answer right away, but his gaze lingered on Matteo before he left. When night came, Emily sat by the incubator again. The room hushed. She touched the miraculous medal and whispered, Thank you for letting him stay, and if you can, help me keep him safe from everything else, even from the people who mean well. The air was still, no roses tonight, but she felt the same quiet reassurance. Sometimes, she thought, miracles didn't need to be constant to be real. 2 days later, Emily slipped into the small hospital chapel after Dana offered to sit with Matteo for a while. She hadn't planned on coming here, but something in her chest kept tugging her toward the quiet space at the end of the hallway. The chapel was dim, lit mostly by votive candles flickering in their glass cups. Stained glass windows threw soft fragments of color across the floor, blues, golds, and reds that moved with each subtle shift of sunlight. At the front, stood a simple altar, and behind it, a tall image of the Virgin Mary, her mantle in the same shade of blue Emily remembered from that first night. Emily sat in the last pew, the cool wood pressing into her palms. She hadn't been in a church in years, but the stillness wrapped around her, heavier than silence, almost like a presence itself. Her mind drifted back to the words Mary had spoken, about the sword piercing her heart, about forgiveness. Emily thought she understood now. To love someone deeply meant opening yourself to the pain of losing them, and that was the fear that kept her clenched tight, unwilling to forgive anyone who might hurt her again. A soft sound made her lift her head. Mary stood at the front of the chapel, as solid and radiant as any living person. The light from the candles seemed to gather around her, but it was her eyes that held Emily, eyes full of sorrow and strength, like they had carried the weight of the world. "You are learning," Mary said gently, her voice carrying without effort. "But you must finish the path you've begun. Forgive the ones who wounded you as I forgave." Emily's throat burned. "I can't. Not completely. Not yet." "You can," Mary said, "and when you do, your heart will have room for the miracle that is waiting." Emily shook her head, tears spilling freely. "It's not just about me. What if they hurt him? What if—" Mary's expression softened, though the sorrow in her gaze deepened. A mother's heart will always fear the sword, but love is not smaller because of fear. It is greater when it faces it. Emily bowed her head into her hands. "I don't know how to start." Mary stepped closer, her presence carrying the faint scent of roses. She placed a hand, warm, real, on Emily's shoulder. "You have already begun." And just as suddenly she was gone. Emily sat in the pew for a long time, the warmth of that touch lingering. She thought about Rafa's halting attempts to show up. She thought about her mother's absence and her grandmother's persistent kindness despite the rift. That afternoon, she called her grandmother in Las Cruces. Abuela Rosa's voice was as warm as ever, laced with a hint of worry. "Mi niña, I've been praying for you every day." "How is the baby?" "He's fighting," Emily said, "and I think I'm ready to talk to Mum." There was a pause on the other end, then Rosa's voice softened even more. "That will be the hardest and the best thing you've done in years." They talked until Emily felt a little lighter. Rosa promised she would find a way to visit soon, even if it meant getting a ride from a neighbor. When Emily returned to Mateo's side that evening, she leaned over his incubator. "We're going to start fresh, you and me," she whispered. "No more carrying things that keep us from moving forward." Mateo's tiny hand twitched, his fingers curling toward hers. Emily smiled through her tears. Maybe the miracle Mary spoke of wasn't just about Mateo's health. Maybe it was about her own heart learning to open again. The next morning began quietly enough. Emily was spooning yogurt from a hospital cafeteria cup, half listening to the murmur of voices outside Mateo's room, when a firm knock sounded at the door. A woman stepped inside, holding a clipboard and wearing a neutral expression. She introduced herself as Karen Ortiz, a caseworker from Child Protective Services. Emily's stomach dropped. Why are you here?" Karen's tone was calm but professional. "We received a routine referral from the hospital's social services department. It's standard when there are concerns about housing instability or unpaid rent during a newborn's hospitalization. My job is to assess the situation and make sure Mateo will have a safe environment when he's discharged." Emily's pulse thudded in her ears. I'm not neglecting him. I'm here every day. I've done everything the doctors asked." "I'm not here to accuse you of anything," Karen replied. "This is just an evaluation." "May I ask you a few questions?" Emily glanced toward Mateo's incubator, then reluctantly nodded. Karen asked about her living situation, employment, income, and support system. Emily answered as best she could, though each response felt like a confession of how close to the edge she was living. Dana arrived halfway through the visit, her presence like a shield. "We've already secured a housing voucher for Emily," she explained to Karen, sliding a folder across the table. Processing is nearly complete, and the landlord has agreed to hold her unit. She's also approved for food benefits and utility assistance. Karen scanned the paperwork, making notes. That's good progress. I'll need to see documentation of income and a plan for childcare if you return to work. Emily's voice wavered. I don't have childcare yet. I can't even think that far until he's home. That's understandable, Karen said. We can connect you with programs that help new mothers find safe, affordable care. After about 20 minutes, Karen stood and closed her clipboard. Based on what I've seen, there's no immediate cause for removal, but I will need to follow up in person after Matteo is discharged. It's standard to ensure all the support systems are in place. Emily nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing a fraction. When Karen left, Emily sank into her chair, pressing her hands to her face. I thought they were going to take him, she whispered. Dana rested a hand on her shoulder. If I thought you were at risk of losing him, I would have told you. You've been here every day. You're doing everything right. That's what matters. Later, Lila came by to check on both Matteo and Emily. I heard about the visit, she said quietly. You handled it. I almost lost it, Emily admitted. But you didn't, Lila said with a small smile. And that's how you keep moving forward. That night, Emily sat beside Matteo's incubator, the medal in her hand. She thought about how close she'd felt to losing everything again, how quickly her fear had flared. The air shifted, subtle at first, and the scent of roses touched her senses. She looked up, and Mary was there standing beside the incubator with her hands gently resting near Matteo's head. Courage, Mary said softly. Every trial you face is shaping the strength you will need. Emily's eyes stung. I don't feel strong. You are learning, Mary replied, and your son will learn from you. When the vision faded, Emily sat in the stillness, her heart steadier. The visit from CPS hadn't broken her. Maybe, just maybe, it had proved she was stronger than she thought. Part 13. The Bosque Vow. 666 words. The first light of dawn painted the sky in streaks of rose and gold as Emily stepped outside the hospital for a few minutes of fresh air. Dana had offered to sit with Matteo, and Emily knew she needed space to clear her head. She followed the familiar sidewalk toward the trail along the Rio Grande, where the bosque trees stretched their twisted arms over the water. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and cottonwood leaves. Emily walked slowly, letting her mind settle. The past 2 weeks had been a blur of beeping monitors, clipped medical updates, and the heavy ache of uncertainty. But here, away from the hospital's walls, she could almost breathe normally again. She stopped at a bench overlooking the river, watching the current slide past. It struck her that life was like this water, relentless in its flow, even when obstacles broke its surface. The sound of footsteps approached from behind. She turned to see Rafa, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie. Lila told me you might be out here, he said cautiously. Emily's guard went up immediately. You shouldn't be asking the nurses where I am. I'm not trying to cause trouble, Rafa said. I've been going to meetings every night. I wanted you to know I'm still clean, and I wanted to see how he's doing. She studied him for a long moment, searching for signs of the man she used to know, the one who could make her laugh before everything fell apart. He's fighting, she said finally. The doctors say it's still day by day. Rafa nodded. I've been praying. I'm not great at it, but I'm trying. Emily's lips twitched at the corner. Me too. They sat in silence for a while, watching the river. Eventually, Rafa spoke again. I almost messed up last night, got into it with a guy at work, and for a second, I thought about walking straight to the bar down the street. What stopped you? She asked. I called my sponsor instead, Rafa said, his voice low. Sat in the back alley and talked until the urge passed. Then I went back inside and finished my shift. Emily didn't know what to say. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real. The kind of quiet decision that could change everything if it was repeated often enough. Look, Rafa continued, I know I can't erase the past, but I want Matteo to know I didn't quit on him. Even if you and I never... He let the sentence trail off. Emily stared at the water. I can't promise anything about the future. But I can tell you this, if you keep showing up, that'll matter more than words ever could. A small smile tugged at Rafa's mouth. I'll take that. When Emily returned to the hospital, the scent of roses greeted her before she even reached Matteo's room. She stepped inside and saw him sleeping peacefully, his breathing steady, his tiny fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. Mary stood at the far side of the incubator, her hands folded in front of her. Her voice was gentle but sure. The path ahead will still be hard, but you are not walking it alone. Emily's heart tightened, a mix of awe and gratitude swelling inside her. Thank you, she whispered. Mary inclined her head. Teach him to choose what is right, even when it is small and unseen. That is how a life is built. And then she was gone, leaving only the soft trace of roses in the air. Emily leaned close to Matteo. You hear that, little one? We're going to build this life, one choice at a time. For the first time, she truly believed they could. Discharge day came with a flurry of forms, instructions, and careful final checks. Emily could hardly believe the nurse's words. Matteo was ready to leave the hospital. His oxygen support had been discontinued, his infection markers had returned to normal, and his weight had climbed steadily over the past week. Still, she felt a knot of worry. Leaving the hospital meant leaving the safety net of constant monitoring, skilled hands, and quick responses. At home, it would all be on her. Lila walked her through the final steps. This is his medication schedule, she said, handing over a neatly organized folder. Call the pediatric clinic if you have any concerns, even small ones. Trust your instincts. You know him best. Emily nodded, committing every word to memory. Dana arrived soon after, carrying a bag of donated diapers and a printed sheet with contact numbers for housing assistance, food programs, and a parish meal train that would deliver dinners twice a week for the first month. I'll check in next week, Dana said. Remember, you're not alone in this. Dr. Patel came by last. He reviewed Matteo's chart one final time, then met Emily's eyes. You've done well here. Now it's about keeping him healthy and giving him a safe, steady home. That's the best medicine he can have. Emily smiled faintly. Thank you for everything. He returned the smile just slightly. Take care of him, Emily, and yourself. The final step before leaving was the car seat test, making sure Matteo could maintain healthy breathing while strapped in. Emily held her breath as the nurse secured him. After a tense 15 minutes, the monitor's steady numbers confirmed he had passed. When the elevator doors opened into the main lobby, the bright afternoon sun spilled through the glass entrance, warm and dazzling. Emily stepped outside with Matteo in her arms, the air fresh and free of antiseptic. But before she reached the parking lot, she stopped. The scent of roses drifted on the breeze, faint yet unmistakable. She turned, and there she was, Mary, standing just beyond the hospital doors. Her blue mantle moved gently in the wind, though no one else seemed to notice her. She smiled at Emily, her eyes filled with warmth and something like pride. You have walked through fear, Mary said softly. Now walk in trust. I will be with you. Emily's eyes stung. I'm still scared. Mary stepped closer, her presence calm and steady. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward in spite of it. And then she was gone, leaving the sunlight and roses behind. Emily blinked away her tears, tightened her hold on Matteo, and walked toward the waiting car Dana had arranged for them. When they reached her apartment, she carried Matteo inside and paused in the doorway. It wasn't perfect. The furniture was second-hand, the walls plain and the space small. But it was theirs. She set him gently in the crib a parish volunteer had delivered, tucking the cream-colored blanket around him. He stirred, his tiny mouth opening in a half-yawn before settling again. Emily sat beside the crib, listening to the quiet. For the first time since his birth, she felt something close to peace. She touched the miraculous medal hanging now around her neck and whispered, "We're home, baby. We made it." In that moment, she knew Mary's promise wasn't just about hospital walls or a single answered prayer. It was about every day that would follow, each one built with faith, love, and the quiet courage to keep going. 3 weeks after bringing Mateo home, Emily pushed his stroller down the familiar sidewalk toward Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. The early autumn air was crisp, and the cottonwood leaves along the street shivered in the breeze. Mateo was heavier now, his cheeks fuller, his breaths even and steady. Every morning Emily weighed him on the little baby scale Dana had found for her, and every morning the numbers crept higher. Each ounce felt like a small victory. When she stepped inside the parish, the scent of candle wax and fresh flowers wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. A few parishioners knelt in the pews, their heads bowed. At the side of the altar, the same elderly woman who had once told her to light a candle for perseverance was arranging a bouquet of roses. Emily lit a candle again, this time not in desperation, but in gratitude. She placed it among the others and whispered, "Thank you for keeping us safe. For not letting me walk through this alone." After Mass, she walked over to the parish pantry with a small bag of groceries, rice, beans, and cereal she'd managed to set aside. It wasn't much, but it was what she could give. The volunteer at the door thanked her warmly, and Emily felt something swell in her chest. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was contributing. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a video call from Abuela Rosa. Her grandmother's face filled the screen, eyes crinkling with joy as she saw Mateo. "Mira como ha crecido," she said. "Look how he's grown." Emily smiled. "He's doing so well. The doctor says he's thriving." "Because his mama is thriving," Rosa replied. "I can hear it in your voice." Even Rafa had kept showing up, bringing a pack of diapers when he could, keeping his visits short but steady, always sober. Emily didn't know what their future looked like, but she could see the effort, and that mattered. Later that week, at Mateo's checkup, Dr. Patel reviewed the numbers and couldn't hide his satisfaction. "His lungs sound clear, weight gain is on track, and he's hitting every milestone for his corrected age. Keep doing exactly what you're doing." As Emily left the clinic, the afternoon sun spilled over the street, warm on her face. She slowed her steps, breathing it in. And then, on the wind, the faint scent of roses. She turned, and there was Mary standing at the far end of the sidewalk. Her mantle caught the sunlight, and her smile carried both tenderness and strength. "You have built a home where hope lives," Mary said. "Guard it well." Emily's throat tightened. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Mary replied, "by choosing love every day." And then she was gone, like the light shifting through leaves. Emily looked down at Mateo, who was watching the world with wide, curious eyes. She bent and kissed his forehead. "We're going to be okay, baby. More than okay." She didn't need proof anymore. Mateo's steady breathing, her growing courage, and the quiet joy in their days were proof enough. She was living it. If this journey of faith and resilience touched your heart, subscribe now so you never miss another story like this. And don't stop here. Click the video on your screen to hear about another true miracle that will stay with you long after it ends.